I was working on this wheel horse garden tractor, trying to finish up the project. But the recoil starter went bad. There was a bad spot in the rope, so it wouldn't retract anymore. I'm going to take the starter apart and put a new rope in it. Everything is held together with that one screw there, but there's some spring pressure there that retracts the rope. I'm going to get some vice grips and clamp the rope there so I can get the handle off. There's the small spring. All the right parts are there. This casting is broke. The little tab's missing. Here it is clamped in the spring. This casting is good, and the spring is good, but this center section's not good. All the small parts look okay. I was looking on the engine shelf, and I saw this recoil starter with the handle missing. When I took it off to see if I could use it, this brand new starter cup and screen was behind it. I'm going to use that because my screen's missing. The rest of this looks pretty normal. Hopefully all the parts are good. Good, this part looks okay. That's the one I need. One of the screws is not original, just like this old one. It has one odd screw. I can take an original screw out of that one. This spring is distorted on the end. That's just open too far. And the spring's broke. There's a loose piece in there. And it's broke there too. I have one good spring. And I have one good center section. I'll put the broken parts on this side. Both of these outer castings are good, but I'm going to use this one because I already made this insert to repair that worn out hole. Most of the small parts are good. I'll pick out the best parts and use them. I want to talk about this insert for a bit. I covered this in a video a few years ago. This original hole's worn out pretty bad. It used to have an insert in it like this one. The rope wore through that insert and made grooves in this hole. This is a 7/16 inch fine thread bolt. I turned the head shorter on the lathe, drilled a hole through it, and put a big lead-in radius on each side. I think I made the nut out of hex stock because it had to be smaller on the outside to fit in there. I'm going to clamp this in the vise so I can get the screws out. There's where it was coming apart, jamming up the whole business. This part looks good. There's a mark there where something ground on it. It looks like it don't affect anything. I'm gonna pick the best parts. These two are probably about the same. Well, no, they're not. This one's damaged here. These are springs. When they wear out, the fingers get worn on the inside. I'll pick the one that's less worn out. They should grip the outside of this part here. This one's loose on there. This one feels the same. Whichever one I use, I'll have to adjust it. I'll pick this one. Next are the washers. Both starters had the correct small washer. And this is the wrong washer. This one has to fit snug around the screw and fit down in this pocket. And this one has to fit snug around the screw and fit in this casting properly. That one keeps the star washer looking clutch spring from wearing into the aluminum. When these fingers wear out, the edges get rounded off. So I'm going to pick the set with the best edges. on these cover plates. One has good screw holes but more wear on the face. The other one has this brazed up hole. I'm going to use the one with the good holes. Okay, that's all the parts. I'm ready to put the new rope in. This plate has some marks where the spring was riding against it. I'm going to sand on that for a bit just to get rid of the edges. I want to put the right type of rope back in it. The rope from both starters is about the same. I'm going to measure it. That looks like about 195 thousandths of an inch at the wide part, 170 thousandths wide where it's mashed, but mostly around 190 thousandths. 3/16 is 187 thousandths, so I'm going to say this is a 3/16 inch rope. Here's some standard braided nylon rope. It says 15.2 meters by 4.8 millimeters. 4.8 millimeters converts to 189 thousandths. So this is 3/16 inch diameter rope. But now it's called 4.8 millimeter diameter rope. Which way do I wrap the stuff around there? Well, it has to work when you put it in this casting. This piece fits in there like that. So the rope has to come in this side and wrap around this way. But from the bottom side, the rope is anchored in the center and wraps this way, so it comes out the hole the right direction. Now if I turn that over, that's going clockwise on this side, so I want to wrap the rope clockwise from this side. The two starters I took apart had two different ways of anchoring the rope. One has a knot and the other one has this loop. This casting has high spots that grip the rope when you wrap it around that post. That's the way it's made to work, but you have to have the correct size rope. So that's why I made sure I had 3/16 inch diameter rope. If you have to use a smaller rope, you might have to tie a knot. Make sure that loop is positioned over the high spots, and make sure the cover mashes the rope down in the right place. This fits in there like that, and the rope wraps that way. I put as much rope as I can on there. It should be flush with the outside diameter. If you put too much on, it won't fit into the housing. It'll bump against that casting. So I stopped there, add some to make sure I have a little extra rope, and that's where I cut it. Now I have to fold this back up so it fits back into the bag. Can't do anything else till that happens. Since this is nylon rope, I like to melt the ends, and then I mash it with my fingers while it's still hot so it'll fit through whatever hole it has to go through. This spring is going to be rubbing up against itself when it's wrapped up in there. So I'm going to put some grease on it so it can slide better. It also keeps the spring from rusting. Gotta have grease in this pocket for the same reason. The spring rides against those 5 ribs down there, so put grease on top of those. Now I'm looking at which way the spring has to wrap in there. When you pull the rope, the spring has to wind up tighter. So from here, that's going counterclockwise. Looking at the spring, laying here like this, the rope spool grips the center of the spring. If I turn it counterclockwise, it's not getting tighter, it's unwinding it. If I flip it over, grip it in the center, and go counterclockwise, now the spring is winding up getting tighter. So that's the way it goes right there. Now I'm going to wrap the spring into this cavity. You have to put the end of the spring over that post and then wrap it in one turn at a time. The tricky part is holding the first part of the spring in place to get started. Once you get it wrapped in there, it'll stay. That's in position where it needs to be. On this one, I remember that end was bent too far because it was gripping the aluminum part that it was hooked over. I'm going to bend that open slightly. Be careful when you're bending springs because it might break. Now I'm ready to put this on there, but it's not going to work. This is where you have to slide those 2 parts together, and the spring has to be hooked onto the rope pulley. There's no way to reach anything in there to move the spring into position while you put it together. This rope pulley has to be flipped over and slid onto this post. This tang right here, well, that tang right there has to end up in this hook on the end of the spring. So if you look at the thickness of this wall right here and how far that tang is from the edge of that hole, well, that's how far it has to be from that post to this hook. So this spring has to be over this way like that for it to line up with the tang when the rope pulley slides down the shaft. How do you make that happen? Well, I'm going to try to bend this spring strategically so that hook is in the right place naturally. So I want the hook to go towards me to get to the post. I'm going to squeeze it on my right side, the camera's left side, and I'll pick this part that looks like it should bend tighter. This is all trial and error. You have to start with slight pressure and keep increasing the pressure until it finally moves. If the spring breaks, you know you put too much pressure on it. You have to keep an eye on where the hook is after each attempt, and you might have to change where you're squeezing it at to get that hook in the right place. You can see I'm not moving it very much, if at all, sometimes. You might think pliers would be a good idea, but if I was to squeeze on the pliers to get a good grip, there would be a flat spot on the spring everywhere you gripped it. That's getting closer there, but the angle of the hook changed, so I have to bend it in a different place. That's closer. Still has to go in a little more. I had to take a break for a bit. I'm going to keep going like I was. This has taken quite a while because I've broken springs before, and that means game over. I'm still going to go a little at a time until I get there. Right now, to get closer to the pin, I'm going to try to bend about here. Hey, that might have done it. That looks close. Well, it goes down in there. I have to get control of this rope first so I can turn the pulley. I don't think that's it yet. I'm going to try some more. That looks pretty good there. Make sure the rope is out of the way so the pulley can slide in and out of there. I'm looking at where the hook is at and trying to position that tang where it'll engage with the hook. If you did it right, you should get some spring return here. That looks okay. If you did it right, you should be able to do it over and over, and each time get some spring return there. Now I want to look at where the rope is. Use that slot to keep the rope out of the way of this casting. I want some initial pressure on the spring, so I'm going to start here and rotate one turn. You can feel the spring wind up. When you take the rope out of the slot, it should bind up on that casting there. That's the maximum amount of rope that can be on the rope pulley. So I'll pull the rope out a little bit more, and that's where the handle should stop the rope when it pulls back in. Now that should rotate smoothly with no catching or binding. Just from exercising it that much, the rope has moved down into the pulley a little bit, and the rope is binding on the casting again. Now I need to move my handle down on the rope a little bit. The slot's still moving, so I'm going to move the handle again. That should be about right. Now I should be able to unwind this. There's the one turn to unwind the spring. And this should be able to go back together with no problem after I put some more grease on the wear plate. Okay, put the rope into the slot so you can control it. Eyeball the tab into position to engage the hook on the spring. Make sure you have the spring pressure when you rotate it, and turn it one full turn to get the preload pressure back. Put the handle back on, and that part should be ready to stay together. Well, that's as far as I'm going this time. Next time I'll try to finish this up and put it on the engine. Alright, that's it.